Now,
Living in a great big way.
one more, boy.
Living in a great big way. Louis.
Hi everybody, welcome to my Paint With Me watercolor tutorial today. Today I'm going to show you 3 experiments to try with putting down watercolor paint. These will be very basic and will help you experiment with the ways that you like to create with watercolor. The first one we're going to do is just figuring out how to put basic shapes down and experimenting with the watercolor to pigment ratio. And so you're going to practice making shades of the same color. And then the next experiment you're going to do is experimenting with wet and wet techniques. That means you're going to put a layer of wet watercolor down, and while it's still wet, you're going to be adding different colors to it and seeing the effects that you can create with that technique. The third technique that I'm going to teach you is a wet on dry technique. That means you're going to put a layer of paint down, let it dry, and then you're going to put a layer of wet paint on top of that and experiment with what you can do with that technique. Those 3 techniques are the basis of so many paintings that you can create. So I'm just going to be skill building today to help you get the skills you need to create beautiful paintings. And I think even the most basic skills can be really, really beautiful when you're playing with color. So let's get started. For today, grab some paper. You can grab some watercolor paper. You can work on a sketchbook like this, or if you are a subscriber, you can download the templates and print them. You can either print them on watercolor paper if your printer has that capability, or you can print them on cardstock like I've done with these today. There are 3 pages. Feel free to take your time with them. If you want to go beyond what I've given you, feel free to do that. Be creative. These skills lend themselves to lots of different options. As you create today, at any time, feel free to pause the video and go at your own pace. You don't have to work at any specific pace. You can take a couple weeks to do this one tutorial if you'd like. The important thing is that you're having fun, that you're relaxing, that you're enjoying the creative process as you go along. So between these 3 different experiments that I'm going to show you, take your time and do them. And if you have an idea as you're painting and you think, oh, this would be fun if I tried this, do that. Get creative. That's what these tutorials are intended for you to do, to kind of launch your own creative process. So have fun with it. I'd love to see what you create. You can send me a picture, and I'd love to see the different things that you come up with just based on these 3 simple prompts. All right, have fun, enjoy it. Hey guys, the first experiment that we're going to do today is experimenting with just one color and experimenting with the pigment to water ratio. And by pigment, I just mean the color that we have here in our tray. Remember in my materials video, I let you know that you can use any watercolor. I just recommend one that has really good pigment. This obviously is one that I've used for a long time. Has a little bit of cat hair in it. But I really love the colors in this one. It's a great starter kit. So what we're going to do is I'm just using a little rounded brush. I'm using the template that I printed out on cardstock, and I've taped it down onto a board. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill in a row of shapes. If you don't have the template, just choose any shape. I have triangles and hearts, but you can do any shape you want. And we're going to see how many shades of one color that we can get just with controlling the amount of water that we use. So we're not going to do any mixing for this one. I mean, you can, but we're just going to try to see what we can produce just with controlling the amount of water that we use. You see here, I'm hydrating this pigment, and I like to get it really wet and get lots of water until I have a good, clear amount of pigment. And you see this is pretty thick here, what I'm working with. So let's go ahead and fill in a shape and see how it looks. With watercolor, you don't want to get so thick that you can't see any of the white of the paper. This is probably as thick as I would ever do watercolor. I don't really like it this thick. I prefer more water because that, to me, is what is special about watercolor. So let's see what happens when we add a little more water. If you see when I'm doing shapes, typically when I'm painting, I do the outline first and then quickly, while it's still wet, fill it in, because I don't want to see that line. I want to have the shape be uniform. And okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep adding water, and I might even, I've got my plate over here, so I might even wash it out even more with water. And I'm going to keep washing it out, and you'll see as I add more and more water, I see more of the white of the paper, and I get a lighter shade of the green. And what I would recommend doing is mix it before you put it on the paper, because if you've got kind of an uneven layer and you've got like too much water and it's not mixed evenly with the pigment, you're going to kind of get an uneven layer of paint. Now that might be your intention. You might like the look of that, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But I'm going to wash it out even further. So each time I'm adding water, and I'm kind of getting an even layer, and then I'm putting it over. In watercolor, really it's all about your preference and kind of the look that you like. You may like the look of an uneven layer. Okay, that one is almost the same as the one next to it, but you can see just by controlling the amount of water, you've gotten at least 3 different shades of that one color. So take some time and fill in the rest of the lines here and just choosing different colors. And as you do that, kind of observe what happens, observe how it dries, and observe the shades that you get. I'm going to do one more for you here. Let's go with this red. Because if you notice, this palette doesn't come with pink, and it doesn't come with white. Would be typically, you know, how you would make a pink. You'd mix with like acrylic, you'd mix red and white to get pink. But with watercolor, you're going to be diluting the pigment instead. And you can see here that as I put it down, it's a little bit irregular. There's a little bit more pigment at the bottom. So that's kind of what happens when it's pretty wet. If you want to get a really, really even layer, you would want to have less paint on your brush. So you can also experiment with the amount of paint on your brush and then also the amount of water. And you can see again, I'm going around the outside of the shape and then filling it in. Okay, so now I'm going to start washing out this red with some water, and I'm going to show you the shades that we can get just with water. Okay, so there we've almost got a pink. Let's go one shape. I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna use the pigment that I have on the brush and get it. You know, and don't worry about staying at the in the lines of this. This is just, okay. So what's happened when here is, to me, it's gotten a little too dry and then you get kind of streaky. And that's actually not a look that I like. I like to have it more even. And so that's something that can happen. If your brush gets too dried out, it's going to get streaky. Now that may be something that you want to do. I'll show you kind of what that looks like. What I'm talking about is if your brush gets too dry, do you see how that got streaky? I don't personally like that look. I like a more uniform shape. So if you find that you're getting some streaky colors, I would just make sure that you have enough water mixed with your pigment. Another thing that can happen is if you look at these two triangles, do you see how there's this really lighter area and it's created some edges? This is what happens when there's more water added and then the pigment is kind of pushed to the edges. You could do that intentionally and you might really like that. If you are trying to achieve a more even layer, then you might not like this effect. So it kind of depends on what you're going for. And if you notice, the edges got really defined there as the pigment was pushed to the edge because of the extra water in the middle. I actually really like that for certain effects. It just kind of depends on what you're going for. Here's another example of actually this what happened here, I think, is the paper buckled a little bit and it pushed the pigments to the side. So this is kind of what will happen if you're using a paper that bends or it doesn't stay flat, which obviously happened here. I don't really mind that actually, but again, it depends on what you're going for. So now what you can do is go ahead and pause the video and complete your experiments with water and pigment. And then that is experiment number 1. Once you're through, come back for experiment number 2. So right now, you know, put on your favorite music and enjoy figuring out kind of what you can do with just water and color. And come right back. All right, guys, welcome back. So the second experiment that we're going to do is a wet on wet technique. Here's an example that I did the other day. I was really inspired by the Matisse, Henry Matisse cutouts and the shapes that he cut out. So our inspiration for this project is from Matisse. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a layer of wet watercolor. And while it's still wet, we're going to add other colors. So for example, in this shape right here, I started with a really, really bright pink. And then you can see I popped a little yellow in there and a little purple. And I want you to see what happens. And you can kind of see what happened in mine as I added different colors. And I encourage you to try different color combinations and see what happens. And Each experiment will teach you something about how watercolor works and how you like to work with watercolor. Some of the things you might like, some of the things you won't like. Both of those things are valuable in your watercolor journey. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I have got the template downloaded and printed onto cardstock, and I've got it taped down just on two edges on a piece of cardboard, just kind of to keep it from curling up at the ends. And usually when I start a painting, I like to start with the largest shape first. For this one, it doesn't matter a whole lot. Sometimes if you start the largest one, then the color that you choose will affect the colors around it. So that's kind of the thinking behind that. But really, you can start however you want. My favorite color is green, so I always go for the green. So I am going to do this shape, and I am going to go around the edges. The trick here is going to be filling in the shape before it dries so that I can drop some other colors in here. And because this is cardstock, it's going to dry a little faster than it would on watercolor paper because it's going to absorb the color faster. So I am painting very, very wet in the hopes that I can still work with that color. If you see, this is not perfect, but that's okay. And you can kind of rehydrate it. Once you've got this shape, the color that you drop in is going to stick to that shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some blue, and I'm going to drop some blue in here. And I'm going to kind of play with it, dropping it in there. Let's try some purple. Let's see how that happens. Purple. All right. What other colors do you think? Maybe some yellow. And we will talk in future lessons more about color theory and kind of how to think about colors and how they go together. But for right now, this is purely just experimenting to see. Oh, okay, I love that. I love the look of the yellow popping into the green. I like the look of the blue. As you play with this, observe what happens. What does the water do? How do the colors combine? Do they combine or do they just sit together? What color combinations do you like? All of these are going to help you learn how you like to work with watercolor. So let's see. Let's do this shape next. Let's do orange. And we're filling it in, very wet. All right. What colors do we want to pop in there? Oh, let's try some purple. Interesting. Okay. You'll notice that some colors, when you put them in there, it'll muddy it up a little bit. Other colors will kind of mix. Okay, let's do some. Okay. Neat. All right, let's do one more, and then I'm gonna let you take some time to experiment with this on your own. I'm gonna do this shape. Again, I want to try to fill it in before the edge line that I did dries up. That's just my own personal preference for when I'm painting a shape. Don't feel like you have to paint as fast as I do. Been doing this for a long time, and I'm kind of a messy painter, so don't feel like you have to be like me. Okay, so far, you can kind of look at what you've done and think about what you like about it, what you didn't like. If you notice, I am avoiding the blacks and the browns. I normally in my paintings don't use those colors very often. If I want to get a brown, I'll usually mix my own, usually by some combination of orange and purple. Black, I usually avoid altogether. That's just a preference of mine. I feel like it often just muddies it up. So you won't see me use black very often. I do think it can be very useful at times. And some people, some artists will use it a lot more than I do. So let's drop some. Okay. One thing I love about watercolor is just the way the water itself does some of the work. If you see here, this blue is just kind of bleeding in there and it's creating a green. And then in the middle, there's this line of blue, and I just think it's gorgeous. And no other paint really works that way. So that's why I love watercolor. Okay, I'm going to pause this video and let you continue experimenting with watercolor. And then we'll come back and do experiment number 3. Okay, guys, I hope you're having fun with this so far. It's time for our very last, third and final experiment today. I love the look of this. This one was done on watercolor paper earlier, and I just want to point out what we're going to do this time is we're going to build some layers. So we're going to start with the largest layer, or the largest shapes. Fill those in with a layer of color. And then when they're done, we're going to come back and do a wet layer on top of that dry layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to be building on our layers. And these are some of the effects that you can get if you see this. I really like this area right here that started with an orange, then a layer of yellow, and then a darker reddish orange. I love the look of that pink on the yellow. I love the look of right here where the pink and the blue overlap and create like a purplish color. So these are all techniques that you can use in your painting. We're going to keep it really fun and easy today. And like I said, if you're using the template, you can follow the shapes. I would start with the largest, lay down that layer. If they're overlapping, then do one at a time. And then we're going to let it dry, come back and do another layer. If you're working on your own, you can do any shapes you want. This week I'm inspired by Matisse's cutouts. I'll put a link in the post so you can see. But so these shapes are inspired by that. You can use this template if you like, or you can do your own shapes. You could do hearts, you could do triangles, you could do circles. You just do totally abstract shapes. The possibilities are really endless with this. So I started with green. I'm really leaning towards green, but let's do something different. Let's start with orange. So again, I'm going to mix get a nice even layer of color. And I'm going to do this shape first. So anything that's overlapping, I'm not going to do right now. I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to keep my brush very, very wet so I can keep it even. You see here it got a little streaky. I'm trying to avoid streaks because I don't like that. I like an even layer. And I want to keep it nice and wet. When you paint really wet, you're going to have to wait a little longer between layers to let it dry, or you can use a drying tool if you're super impatient, like I am sometimes. And don't worry if you go out of the lines, it's all right. This is an experiment. And if you don't like what you paint, then you learn what you did wrong and come back and try it again. And just don't be too hard on yourself. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the time to be creative. Maybe use a different part of your brain you don't normally use. Turning the paper is helpful so then you can keep your hand off of the paper. So when you're doing this, you can do a really wet, light pigment, or you can do a lot darker. I would suggest going with light to start with so that you can build the layers. If you start too dark, it might be hard to see the layers that you layer over with. Alright, I think I'm gonna do a really light purple down here. Again, I'm not really mixing the colors at this time because I just want to show you the possibilities with layering. Once we talk about mixing colors, you could come back to this project and redo it with, a whole other palette of color options after or you can do that now if you want. You can also drop in colors if you want to kind of combine what you learned in the previous experiment. Let's see, I think it's time for a yellow. I like to paint kind of all the way around a painting. Yellow is funny because it's the one color that you want to make sure you clean off your brush before you dip in your yellow. Because once you lose your yellow, it's a lot harder to get back. Sometimes you can kind of cheat and have your green brush go in your purple and it's not a big deal. But yellow is the color that's more unforgiving. Okay, so it looks like I've got this one, and this one as kind of the base colors. I think maybe what I'll do is maybe do another green over here. Generally, if I'm painting something like this, I don't want to have the same color next to the same color, if that makes sense. So since this green is separated by this orange, I feel okay about putting another green. So I haven't used blue yet. So let's make this blue. We'll talk about this later, but if you noticed the center color, that bright orange really pops out. And according to color theory, Orange is a warm color, so it comes to the forefront when you're looking at it, and then cool colors like green, blue, and purple will recede the background. So all artists will play with a combination of the warm and cool colors. And they'll use it to their advantage. All right, we got one more little guy up here. I'm gonna do a really light purple. So I did a really, really watery. You know what? I realized I didn't do red. So let's make this little guy red. Okay. I'm going to take a few minutes to let this dry, and then I'll be right back. Okay, we are back to do our next layer of color. So again, I'm going to start with the biggest shape and go from there. I think I'm going to go for kind of a pink shape here. I hope that you're having fun with this. Like I keep saying, I think anytime you spend just experimenting and learning, you're learning something. Even if you feel like the final painting, is not as successful as you wanted it to be, say, you still learn something and you are progressing in your paint journey. I think every artist would tell you that the final product that you see is a result of 1,000 little failures and successes and experiments and frustrations. And yes, talent is part of it, but another big part is just the experimenting, development of your own style. So now I'm just going back and adding layers of color that I think might look good. And as you paint, you'll learn your favorite color combinations. I know I have mine. And at this point, you could also drop some little areas of color. Again, if these shapes that I provided are not striking you as fun, then do your own shapes. You could start with pencil, or you could just freehand it. That's going to depend on your personality and your level of comfort. Okay, I really like that red on purple. That was kind of surprising to me as I put it down, how much I liked that. I'm really liking the blue on yellow. What I'm not liking as much is the orange as the base. I feel like it's kind of overpowering the other colors. But that is an interesting blue, so it's good to kind of keep in mind that color, because that color could be useful for some kind of painting. I don't know that I like it on my painting today, but that's what an experiment is. Learning what works, learning what doesn't work. I actually really, really like this combo, this very light purple and very light red. I like the pink that you get out of that. So that's a good. I like the green that we get when we overlap the yellow and the blue. All right, try to be. So, according to color theory, green and red are contrasting colors, which will create kind of like a muddy color if you mix them. So I'm not going to put orange or red over the green because I know that I'm not going to like the color that results. So, but it will be a worthwhile experiment if you try it, like I've been saying. See, I have a little pink here in my palette. This is like a rose color, which is a little bit more pinky than the red I've been using. So I'm going to try that. Now look at me. I just said that I wasn't going to put red over green, and then I did it. I did it. And I don't mind it. Okay. And let's try. Let's put, I don't know. Let's try. I'll put a blue over the red and see what happens. And then I've got that one little spot. Okay. Okay, I like the purple. Not bad. All right, let's see. I think this is the last shape, and then that little one, that little guy. Let's go with the yellow. Okay, if you want to go ahead and pause your video, you can do that. Finish up your painting, and then we'll come back and we'll review everything we've talked about today. Okay guys, I just wanted to review the experiments that we did today. The first one was creating shades just with pigment and water. So I hope you saw the variety that you can get without even mixing any two colors, just by controlling the water, the effects that you can get. I hope you kind of saw how you like a shape to be covered your preferences with how they look, and kind of some of the challenges that can occur with water, whether the water creates uneven shapes or buckles the paper, things like that. Those are things that you just learn to work with as you gain experience. And then our second experiment that we did was dropping different colors in while they're wet. This was my example, an example I had worked on earlier. I just encourage you to look back what you did and think about the areas that you like. Even if you don't like a certain area, pick out an area that you think is really interesting, that kind of holds some promise of something that you could use in a future painting. So for example, like right here, oh, I love the end of this little arch. There's a little blob of pink. I think that's great. I think the pink does really interesting things. There might be some areas, like say right here, because of the amount of water that I was using, it creates multiple drying layers. I don't know if you can see that. To me, that looks a little messy. I don't mind messy, but that's a little too messy. So I can think, oh, okay, so I've got to kind of control the amount of water and to avoid this look. But in other areas, I really like that look and the interesting things that the water does. Then you can think about like what color combinations did you think were really interesting? When yellow gets plopped into blue, do you like that color combination? Where might you see that in nature? How might that create something really beautiful and something you're trying to create? I really like how this blue and pink and green and yellow can combine in this little blob here. So all of this, I think, gives you a lot of information and examples of things that you can do and the things that watercolor is capable of doing. And then in our final experiment, we layered color. And I think this experiment has a lot of potential to teach you what color combinations look good, how to layer, how to build the layers. You can find a color combination that you really like, and you might even mark it with pencil. You can say, oh, this is blue over purple. This is a combination that I really like. Blue over green. I really like the way that red looks over blue. And so that is all really good information for you as you go on your painting journey. Here's that example that I showed you earlier. Really love the combination there. Again, I think I showed you earlier the pink and the red together. So now this is just the basic level. We didn't even mix colors. So you can imagine the endless combinations that you can achieve when we start mixing some of these colors. So that's super exciting. And I hope you enjoyed it. And stay tuned for our next lesson. We're going to talk about mixing colors. And we also will do some projects that will combine all of these techniques. Guys, that was so fun. Was that not so fun? Watercolor is amazing. I hope you had fun with it. I hope you take some of these experiments and try different things and combine them in different ways and try different shapes. And send me a picture. I'd love to see what you create. You can add a photo in the comments of the post, or you can email me. My email's mary@marydeandraws.com. Love to see what you create. I'd love to see your own creativity. I hope you do something different than I did and enjoy. And if you subscribe, you can download all the templates that I have here, and they can be used in a classroom or for homeschool or for small groups. If you have any questions about that, you can email me as well. And thanks so much for joining me. Bye.